Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
it was interesting for me to read about you as a young child disclosing to your mother about the abuse.
Yeah.
I meet a lot of people who are not able to disclose and don't until they're adults. And I was just wondering if you would explain, tell us just the context in which you were able to tell what happened.
Well, first of all, when it happened, I didn't disclose. I didn't say anything to my mother. I said something to her when another girl in the village told her mother. And they obviously had a different kind of relationship than I did with my mother. But when my mother heard about this other girl through the grapevine in the village, she sat me down and asked me, she said, Kathy said that the teacher touched her inappropriately. Has this ever happened to you? And I knew immediately what she was referring to, but I never did go to her initially and say something odd happened with the teacher. And
Mhm.
I've had to really question myself over the years, like, why didn't I do that? Um, and I do go into a bit of that in my book about like questioning myself. Now, mind you, I had just turned 9 years old. I mean, I was very young at that point. But when she asked me, I said, yes, something did happen to me. And she asked me what. And I told her in detail about him putting his hand on my leg and sliding it up under my dress. And I think, and I do go into this in the book, I would have expected in retrospect, but at that point, knowing my mother was not a touchy-feely person. You would think at this point, if a parent found out that that happened, they would immediately empathize with the child. Oh my goodness, that's terrible. Let me give you a hug,
Yes.
etc. I never got any of that. My mother wanted dates and times. When did that happen? What time of the day was it? Where were you, etc. All the details, but none of the empathy. So then she asked me to check my diary, which they had just given me for my birthday in January. So this was probably a couple of months later. So maybe March, April, something like that. She wanted me to check my diary to see if I had put anything down that would indicate what day it had happened.
Mhm.
And I didn't have anything about about my incident. But I did have something in it about when another young girl yelled out in class, I'm not going to stay after school and let you take my pants down. I mean, that happened in the middle of our classroom. I mean, how bizarre is that?
Mhm.
We're expected to carry on with language arts and math.
Oh,
Somebody saying this,
oh,
and the teacher looking at everybody and saying, I don't know what she's talking about.
oh,
Of course, all the girls knew what
you.
she was talking about.
Well,
Yeah.
it's shocking to think of your mother going straight for, what kind of report you had made of the abuse rather than to
Yeah.
what must have felt like, and even to have words for what happened to you, it was a kind of miracle, but she didn't see
Yeah.
that, didn't see what you might need
No,
having disclosed that. I don't know if you
no,
then
but
felt that you had, messed up in some way because no, you didn't have it recorded and the date and the precise.
at 9 years
Yeah,
old.
at 9 years old.
Yeah.
So when I disclosed, my stepmother asked me if he had penetrated me. Like I barely understood what that meant. And it
Yeah.
hadn't happened like that. And I said no. And then I had this kind of just this slide into total confusion because something had shifted because no, he hadn't. raped me with his penis.
Right.
And suddenly I was like making too much of this. Like, oh, you know,
Oh, is that all?
is that all? I was 9 years old,
Yeah.
too. And well, you were 8 when it happened, weren't you?
I, it's a little foggy, but I think I was just before my ninth birthday.
Okay,
And my mom questioned me when I was maybe 9 and 2 or 3 months. So
right.
it all happened over a 4-month period.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it was a very similar feeling of being interrogated and somehow
Mhm.
having the wrong answers. That's
Right.
what I was left
Right.
with. I don't
Yeah.
know, does that feel like similar to what you experienced?
Well, my mother did ask me what happened. She never asked me any details like you were asked. I
Hmm.
don't think I would have understood
Hmm.
what penetration was, but that on a scale, and I think I put that in my book, somehow people, uh, how can I say this? They put harm on an imaginary scale. And
Mhm.
if the person is just like the case I was just telling you, slap me in the butt, that would be, not that bad. But if it was full on intercourse, then yes, that would be very bad. But of course, now we know that it's not actually, I mean, oh, let me start again. Some harms are worse than other. I would say that. However, it really depends on the child and how sensitive that child is. Having a hand go up your leg, and of course, we all wore dresses in school at that time. We had to, because that's what happened to the girl who reported, named Kathy. She was standing at the piano singing, and he took his hand off the keys and put it on her leg and went right up under her dress. And some people might say, oh, well, that wasn't that bad. But you have to look at it from the point of view of the child. The child is being invaded. The child has known for years that there are special parts of my body that other people shouldn't touch. We know that instinctively.
Mhm.
And if somebody does touch you in those places, that's a huge invasion of not only the child's privacy, but their body. And psychologically, it's a huge invasion because you have not been respected. Um, and yes, I think it's hard for adults to understand that children can have those very strong feelings even when the abuse to the adult doesn't seem that bad.
Mhm.
Because the adults put their own judgment on it rather than looking at how the child is experiencing it.
Yes, yes. It's hard to define it. It's like the you suddenly you go from being a little person to being an object, but that doesn't convey the incredible shattering experience of that.
Yes. And
It's
I'm sorry.
disorienting.
Well,
Yeah.
I was going to say, also, I think, like in my case, um, he never touched me in quite the same way again. Now, my sister and I were taken out of school for, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks while my mother, um, waited to see what the school board and what the inspector were going to do. And when they didn't do anything, my parents decided it would be okay to send us back to school as long as we weren't in the same room alone with the teacher. So by doing it that way, they've set up the teacher as a person to fear, which he was.
Mhm.
So I was going back into a classroom where I had someone teaching me who was the person to fear. He was the predator,
Mhm.
but nobody was going to do anything about it. And as I got older, and finally I had my period at 11 and 2 months, I was quite young.
Mhm.
Then I started to fear, well, he watches everything we do. I mean, you have to understand the classroom was grades 4 to 8 in one small classroom. I was shocked when I went back to the school to see how small that room actually was.
Wow.
And here we all
Oh,
are crowded
suffocating.
together,
Yeah.
the big kids, the little kids. And you couldn't hide anything from him because
Mm.
he was at the front of the room watching us all the time. And he would know if I brought a little purse to school with not tampons, but pads.
Mhm.
And I was terrified. I was terrified at every juncture of my maturity.
Oh,
He would know if I had a bra now
oh,
that I'm 13.
God.
Um, because he'd be watching everything. And but my parents didn't seem to understand any of that.
Well, you were told to go into an environment where you had absolutely no control,
Yeah,
to protect yourself, and you were
right,
instructed to protect yourself.
right.
So the helplessness inherent of that, day after day after day for years,
5 years.
what
Yeah,
does that do to a person who's still developing
yeah,
her sense of self, her understanding of how the world works?
right.
So,
Well, it has had a profound effect on my life, and it's had a profound effect on how I've dealt with my relationships, my children. Um, yeah,
yes, so as we move into the repercussions, I just want to back up for a second to say that also reading your book and how your parents reacted, and they waited, your mom waited to see if any action would be taken by
right,
the school or by the
right,
school board. No action was taken, so you went back to school.
right.
And I used to say, my family did nothing and your parents did nothing, but they in fact did something, and it was to put you back in harm's way. And
Right.
it's so much more active than I realized. I sort of thought of it as a kind of like negligence is a kind of like, well, your attention is somewhere else. You forgot to look after your child, but it's much more complicated than that. I wouldn't
Yes, it
say
is.
that there are decisions, conscious decisions going on. I'm not sure if that's it either. But like, I don't think your mom said to herself, I'm going to put my child back in harm's way. But there's something she did that was
Yeah.
an active decision.
Yes, and I think I even put that in my in my book that no, my parents would never have said, "Oh, there's a predator in the school. I'm going to put my children right back there." They
Right.
never consciously thought of it that way. And it was interesting. The other night I was giving a talk in a small town close to Calgary, and somebody obviously decided that they would try to understand it from my parents' point of view. And they said, well, was there another choice for your parents? Um, was there another school close by? Um, and I said to them what I've said to myself. They chose to do something that shouldn't have been on the list of options. They should have found some other way to deal with this, even if it was just homeschooling. We could have done homeschooling and told the inspector, until that guy's gone, my children are going to stay home and do their schoolwork here
Mhm.
until there's a safe environment.
Mm.
Well, My mother didn't think of that. My father had more education than my mom, but my mom didn't even graduate high school. But she was smart. She was a smart woman. Um, and also there was a school two concessions away, and there was a school the other way, maybe a couple of miles. So I'm sure they could have gotten together with other families and said, well, we'll drop off Karen
Mhm.
at, ironically, some good friends of my parents lived right across the street from another school.
Oh, really?
So they could have, my father could have driven me there, dropped me off. I could have gone to school with those kids
Oh,
until the situation was remedied. But none of those, yeah, none of those, as far as I know, none of those options were discussed.
right.
So,
Yes, I think you do a really good job in the book of explaining the context where all of this could happen. It seems so outrageously cruel to children. But you explain a lot of the factors in the village that doesn't excuse the behavior at all, but you
mhm,
can see a whole, I guess, a whole culture that people are like living under. It's like a weight on
right.
everybody, that would, something like that would
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah, I wasn't looking for excuses or anything. I was just trying to find a way of explaining what happened or understanding how this could happen. And there's a very good book that I also have.
Awesome.
Um, this was written, oh, shoot, just a minute. This book was written back in the 60s, and it's about rural Ontario north of Toronto. And it was set, kind of from a sociological point of view. This man was trying to explore the different aspects of life in rural Ontario in the same time frame that I was talking about, the
Mhm.
50s and 60s,
Mm.
and the same code of silence was present in many of the people that he interviewed. In fact, he interviewed a minister who said that his most frequent parishioners to come looking for more psychological help were women who had experienced incest as children. So this has been going on a long, long time. And if
Mm.
you are from a very small village and everybody is related and everybody knows each other, you don't want to raise that flag. Um,
Mhm.
yeah. Now, my parents weren't part of the village family systems, but the rules were so stringent and unspoken
Mm.
that it took another 6 years before two families who also were not related to the other people in the village for them to raise the flag, years after my incidents,
Mhm.
and to get up a petition. And they finally did get rid of the teacher. And I have to think that it was partially due to the fact that we went through this years
Mhm.
before, and the inspector was still the same inspector.
Mhm. Right. So it was cumulative.
Yeah,
There was a
yeah,
tipping point.
right. Where
Yeah.
they didn't rescue us, but they did
Mhm.
rescue subsequent children, which is good.
Well, am I correct that in fact he wasn't fired? He was sent off to another school.
He was removed from
Oh,
his position.
mm,
That's the nice word for fired.
okay.
And he wasn't sent to another school. He must have applied
Oh,
to another country school near Aurelia, Ontario.
okay.
And within a year and a half to 2 years, he came back to our area because he was brought up in our area. So he came back, but he never taught again.